Hello and welcome to episode 9 of this tiny barn build series. Now in the last video I managed to get the structure built for that gas bottle enclosure fireplace design. And today the gas fitter is going to be arriving. He's going to be relocating the gas pipe so we can get the gas bottles into that new enclosure. Now this is a great moment in the project because it means I can put all of the services in place, the internet, the water, the electricity and so on, and of course all of the underground drainage, so I can backfill and get my parking space back. So the first thing I need to do before he arrives today is get that timber frame fixed in place in the fireplace structure and then line it with this fibre cement board. Now when I come to cut the cement board, it's a fibrous cement product. That means that the particles are going to be really quite hazardous to your lungs. I'm not particularly vigilant about wearing a face mask when I really should. And to be honest, the main reason for that is they're so uncomfortable to wear. Wearing glasses, having facial hair, these don't work well with a mask over a long period of time. But I'm hoping that's all about to change. So I'm going to have a go at the Basecamp face mask and see if this is really as good as they say. Now I'll go through some of the features of this face mask later, assuming they work the way they're expected to, and tell you whether this is a great product or whether this is just going to go in the same place as all the other face masks I've got. If you watched the last video where I formed this chimney breast, I also made this wooden frame, and this is going to be supporting the LPG gas bottles, the regulator and all the valve sets that connects the gas to the cabin. It's also the structure that the hinged barrels are going to be suspended from, but more on that in another video. And to fix it in place, I'm using the same concrete screws that I used to fix the formwork in forming this concrete structure. I'm using a masonry bit to drill the hole, and then the impact driver to drive the screw in there, with the threads of the screw biting into the concrete. 3 screws per side, more than adequate to hold this in place, and then just checking it for plumb. With this framework firmly fixed in place, I've got one more thing I need to do before the gas fitter comes and installs the pipe which is going to come up through the hearth in this area here. Now the LPG bottles are supplied by a regulator and valve set, and that needs to be installed down the centre line of this framework. Now the regulator I want to be on the back so I don't see that, it's accessible through this open window, but the valve set I need to be pointing forwards so I can actually switch between the 2 bottles if I need to. So I've made up this steel bracket. It's just a piece of angle iron. I've bent over the ends and welded along the seam, and that way I've got somewhere to fix into the framework top and bottom, and I've drilled a couple of holes and tapped them so I can attach, or the gas fitter can attach the regulator directly to this. Now these holes are slightly offset to give room for the bracket that holds the regulator, so I want the centre line of the regulator and valve set to be in line with the centre line of the frame. So I'm going to make sure, instead of lining up the bracket, I'm going to line up the bolts, or the centre of the bolts. Good, that's in place. Now the other thing I need to do here is put these steel brackets on the back of this framework here, just like so, and that way the gas bottle rests up against that, and then they'll be chained from the front, and that way they can't move in the event of an earthquake. Now I have made a glaring error here. Have a look at this bracket. It's got 2 holes in it, and the idea was I'd put some screws in through the bracket and into the wooden frame. However, I've bolted the frame in position and I can't get to that hole over there. So what I'm going to have to do is use a long series drill and go straight the way through the timber and put a nut and a bolt in there, because I don't want to remove the frame again. And with the framework finished so the gas fitter can come and complete the install, I can get on with cutting out that cement board. Now I'm just going to check a few measurements here before I go ahead and actually cut the cement board to size. Sketch that down, and then I know it'll be a nice accurate fit. Actually, I want to go from there to there. It's 200. But rather than measure out each of these cutouts and transfer that onto the sheet, which will take a bit of time and could lead to some inaccuracy, I'm going to cut the perimeter, fit it in place, and then on the inside draw around those cutouts, and that way I know it's going to be a perfect fit. I'm going to cut the height of this fiberboard slightly short by about 4 or 5 millimeters. And that way, if these bottom timbers expand or contract, if they swell, which is highly likely, it won't try and force the board and work its way loose, because I'm holding it in place with nails and they don't have wonderful holding power. It also gives me a gap at the bottom to run a bead of sealant, so we'll get a nice clean finish, and it prevents moisture wicking up into the fiberboard. Now, they do make a special type of cutter for cement boards such as this. It's a hand tool. You scribe along the line and then snap the material. It doesn't leave a very crisp edge, and although I've got one of those cutters, it's half an hour away in storage. So instead, I've set up the 4-inch grinder with a diamond cutting disc. Now, this is going to give me a nice crisp straight line. However, it's also going to create a lot of dust, and that's where I'm hoping the Basecamp dust mask is going to come in handy. I don't like wearing face masks. They're very uncomfortable, and particularly they push my glasses out of position. And these are progressives, which means if they're out of position, my focus is off and my balance is off, and that's not great. These have been designed for anybody to wear. However, they're particularly good for people who wear them for a long period of time. I intend to do that. And for people who wear glasses. They're not supposed to be uncomfortable, and they're not supposed to move your glasses out of position. Let's see if that's true. Now, in the kit here, and this is a feature I really like about this product, is it's kind of modular. In the kit, you get the face mask, which is a fabric nylon outer skin, and that's washable. Replaceable valves, which you can also wash, rather than throwing the whole thing away, just buy the parts you need. A metal nose clip that's adjustable, and on the inside, you can see the replaceable filter. This is the carbon filter, 6 layers. In the kit, you also get another 6 active carbon filters to replace the one that's in the mask. Let's see how comfortable it is to put on and wear. Now, they do say in the instructions to put the face mask over your face first and then put the headband in place. I don't like doing that. I have to take my glasses off to do that, and I don't want to. So let's see if we can get this on without taking my glasses off. Okay, nice and easy. So I've got a headband over the top here, just over the top back of my head, fully adjustable with these buckles that you see here, so I can pull that to make it tighter and loosen it slightly, just so it's comfortable and sealed well. You can see I'm fogging up already, and that's because I haven't got a good seal on this nose clip yet. A little bit of a pinch, and let's see if that does the job. And then this strap around the back, just to pull the base of the mask in. Okay. Let's give this a go for a while and see just how comfortable it is. It was at this moment that I knew I'd forgotten to measure it correctly. Now, I know I said I was going to have a small gap under the bottom to be able to get some sealant in there. However, my gap is 100 millimeters. Okay, I've written down the wrong number, cut it to the wrong size, but it's not game over yet. I'm going to press ahead and finish cutting this out and install it. And I'll just use the offcuts to create a 100 millimeter spacer at the bottom. I'll be able to blend it in before I paint it. You won't see this backboard. I think it'll be okay. Okay, there we go, it's ready to fix in place. A little bit more cutting than anticipated because of my mistaken measurements, but it was a good opportunity to test out this mask. Now, initial thoughts with any new product, well, they're always going to perform well. It's the long-term test that really matters. But my initial thoughts on this were it's actually very comfortable. My glasses didn't fog up at all once I got that nose pinched nice and tight. If I were to be a little bit critical, it's putting a little bit more pressure on my nose than I'd like, but it's fully adjustable. I just need to fine-tune it. And if fine-tuning it doesn't work, they do sell another product, these foam nose pads. And these are self-adhesive. They go on the inside of the carbon filter here, and they just lift the mask up and give you a little bit more cushioning around the nose, alleviating that pressure. So I'm going to try and fine-tune the mask in terms of its fit. And maybe after a few days of cutting, I might try these out and see if they're actually of any benefit. Now, I have to say that this video isn't sponsored by Basecamp whatsoever. They haven't paid me any money, but they have sent me the product free of charge to try out and use on my projects for an unbiased opinion. And that's exactly what you're getting here, an unbiased opinion. Now, I'm going to put you a link in the description below that you can go and purchase these with a 10% discount. If you use the code, which is on the screen right now, that'll give you a 10% discount on your order. Right, I'm ready to fix this problem here with this bracket where I can't get the screw in from behind because the concrete is in the way. So I'm just going to make sure it's actually level. I'm going to drill straight through the timber into the steel and put this coach bolt in. Now this is going to go in this way round, so the domed head is going to go flush with the timber, and the square shank on the back of the head is going to bite into the timber and stop this rotating as I tighten up the nut. I'm going to start by counterboring a hole that's a big enough diameter for the head of that bolt to sit below the surface, and then drill all the way through with a bit that's suited to the diameter of the shank. And because my drill bit is only just long enough to go through the timber and make a mark in the steel, I'm using a scrap piece of wood to put leverage on the steel bracket so the drill bit can mark the centre of the hole. Then I can drill it, get everything lined up, and pop the coach bolt in place, making sure it's level and putting the nut on the back. Now I'm just going to position this temporarily in place, hold it in place with a couple of nails. I will need to remove this when Mike comes back to finish off the plumbing in a few days' time. I also need to cut a hole here so I've got access to the valve, and I won't know where that is until he's done the installation. I'm going to use just a couple of these ring shank nails, galvanized, hot dipped galvanized, and they really do grab hold of the timber, so I'm only going to put them in a couple of millimeters, and that way it's going to be much easier to remove them when I come to do the proper install. Well, now it's time to turn my attention to getting all of those services and conduit pipes into the trench. Okay, well now the water pipe and gas pipe are in that conduit ready to be connected. I've got to get my electrical pipe in there as well. Remember, this needs to go into the same conduit because the internet network connections are going to go through here, and there has to be a good separation between electrical and network. Here's the problem. This conduit is already pushed up underneath the cabin, and the electrical cable is in there and wound up ready to be connected to the fuse board. And I've put a secondary cable in here. This also isn't connected at either end, and we can use that later to pull through and fish through another cable if we need to. This needs to be through that conduit that goes underneath the foundations at the bottom of the wall, but it also needs to have those two electrical cables inside it, and they also need to be underneath the foundation of the wall. So what I've got is this Blue Mall cable rod set. And these are like a small diameter fiberglass fishing rod. I'm going to push them through the conduit, hook them to the ends of those two wires, and then pull it through in the back of the trench. Let's see if it works. So these are rather like drain rods. They have a screw thread on the end, flexible fiberglass shaft, and they screw together like so. And one of these rods, this one here, has a hook on the end. And that is what we're going to hook onto those two wires. Okay, so that's a female thread. So we want the male thread through here. Right, well, we'll keep going until these rods come out the other side. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you yet, don't worry, it doesn't make sense to me either. I've never used these before. But I think the theory seems to hold true. I think it'll work. Now as I push this through the conduit, I don't want this picking up any dirt or debris that's in there and filling up with rocks. So I'm just going to tape up the end, and that way it stays nice and clean inside. And I can't tell you just how tight it is back behind this wall. There's certainly no room for a camera. But with a bit of contortionism, I managed to get the conduit through that pipe, which is about 1.5 meters in length underneath the foundation. Then I just need to split the insulation so I can feed the hook through and tape it to one of those rods. And there we go. Now if I tape that up nice and tightly, when I pull it through, it won't snag on anything and it won't tear through the insulation. But there are 2 cables, so let's do this one as well. Right, let's get down to the other side and see if we can pull on that rod and pull these cables through. There we go, look at that. Magic. And with a bit of manipulation, I managed to get those cables into the conduit and align the 2 ends of the conduit pipe. Then some solvent adhesive on both surfaces, making sure it's a watertight seal. And this joint is under some stress at the moment because of the bend in the pipes, so I'm just wedging some bricks behind it to take the stress away from the joint while the glue goes off. Right, so I've come down into the garden here, armed with my machete, because somewhere in amongst this pile here, I've got a stash of water pipe. Now I'm going to need that because I want to install it before I do the backfilling, and ultimately it will supply the workshop, the large workshop build. Now just for reference, the workshop build is going to be in this area here. And if I spin around, you can see just up there, if I get past this tree, there, right there is the tiny barn, okay? So I need to be able to run water all the way down to this area here. And as I say, somewhere in this pile, there's some pipe. Let's see if I can uncover it. Well, I think I've found it. Here you can see I've got some black low pressure pipe, but just below, there you go. So there's the coil of blue water pipe that I need to uncover. So I'm going to spend 10-15 minutes chopping that out. Oh, 10 or 15 minutes, what a joke. That took me 3 hours. I had to be really careful with the machete not to nick the pipe, so it was a really careful, slow and steady extraction. This blue water pipe that I'm installing now is going to become the future water supply for the workshop. I want to make sure that this water pipe is in behind the wall in the trench, out the other side and curled up underneath the tiny barn floor structure, so when I do start that workshop build, it's going to be really easy to come and extend the pipe. There we go. So I'm just curling it up and taping it. When the plumber gets here, he'll put an end cap on it, and then that will be it for now. Right, just 2 more conduits to complete. In this lower trench, we've got the yellow, which is the gas, the orange, which is the electrical supply, and the blue, which is the water, which is going to on-feed into the new workshop eventually. This conduit here, which will be buried below ground, this has got water, which is going to supply a hose tap to the tiny barn, and I've got to put 2 more conduits in there for the security system and for the network connections. Now for the network connection to the tiny barn, I'm using some Cat 6A gel-filled UV stable cable. Now this is designed to go underground, overground, and wobbling free. Sorry. I think I've got cabin fever from all the bad weather we've been having. Let's do that again. Now the gel filling will allow it to be moisture resistant, so it's designed to go in the ground. Even so, I'm still going to put it into a conduit because that'll give it added protection, but also means in the future if I need to replace it, I can easily do that without digging up all of this area. So I've taped all the cables together that I need. There are 3 of them that I need to pull through this conduit. I'm using my fish hook again. I'll tape these and pull it through. Got about 3 lengths of this to join together. When I decided that the other side of this retaining wall was going to become a decorative shop window, I figured it might be quite a nice idea if I've got the option of lighting that up. And so I'm just preparing another conduit that'll provide a low voltage cable into that area. Now the cable you see here is just a random piece of cable. I'll use it to pull the low voltage cable through later on in the project. And you can see here how it exits into the junction box that I cast into the structure. And with that done, I think I've got all the services in place and I'm ready to think about backfilling. Now I'm almost ready to get the drainage in this trench and then backfill against the retaining wall to reclaim this parking space. But there's a couple of things I need to do first. And one of those is to put a damp membrane on the back face of this side of the wall. Now I'm not going to do the entire internal surface of the wall. In this climate I'm not concerned about moisture getting into the wall and then freezing. We just don't have heavy frosts. But what I am concerned about is that on the opposite side of this area here is that decorative shop window. And I want to do everything I can to prevent the possibility of moisture ingress. So I'm going to apply 2 coats of Sika Black Seal to this surface, but first I need to prepare it. I need to make sure it's clean. You can see I've got some staining here from these slate tiles, and I need to get rid of this sharp edge over here. The product requires a radius on internal and external corners. I've got a little bit of a sharp edge here and a little bit of one just down here. Now I think you'll agree that the testing I've done so far with the base camp mask has been pretty lightweight. However, this is a real test. I'm in a trench, enclosed area, there's no wind, and there's a lot of material going to be taken off this surface. For that, I'm going to be using the grinder again, but I've fitted it with a face grinding disc. That means I can hold it flat against the surface like this, and it's this face that's going to be doing the work, not the edge of the disc. So we'll get the mask on and see if I can get this surface clean and keep my lungs clean at the same time. There we go. Well, I'm still suitably impressed by this mask. You can see it's captured a little bit of the dust there, but it's the carbon filter on the inside that's really protecting me, and it feels very comfortable. So the mask I'm using is the M Pro, but they do have quite a range on their website, different masks to suit different applications, so maybe there's something there that'll suit the type of work that you're doing. If you do feel like looking at their website, either go directly to their website or use the link in the description below. Now, if you use the link in the description, that'll give me a small percentage commission of the sale at no charge to you. But either way, however you get to their website, do make sure at checkout to put in the code DANW10, and that'll give you a 10% discount on the total cost of your purchase. See my friendly fantail's back. There he is, darting around looking for insects. Anyway, it doesn't say you have to stir this, but my goodness, look at the consistency of this. Oh, see my way down now. Bye. Right. Just using a cheap 4-inch brush. You can wash it out, throw it away, doesn't matter. Now, this is a bitumen based product and it needs about 12 to 24 hours in between coats to dry. So the next day I gave it its second and final coat. Well, a huge thanks to Mike Ellis for coming out and sorting out my plumbing, getting the water supply in place and relocating that gas pipe, which means I can do something that I've been looking forward to do for a very long time, and that's remove this gas bottle enclosure. Get rid of all this old timber frame. It'll really open up this space. It'll get rid of an obstacle for me and an obstacle for you, because to be honest, filming around this structure, trying to show you what I'm doing back here has been quite difficult. So getting it out of the way will be great for when I brick up that facade. So let's get rid of this frame. I purposely don't want to hammer on this structure too much because these posts are really all that's supporting that bank from collapsing into where my drainage needs to be. And I don't want to have to dig it out again. I'm going to cut through these here just to remove this front frame. It is a trip hazard. If I step off this platform thinking that that's solid, and it's not, it's going to cause all manner of problems and delays on the project. So I'm just going to saw through these and get rid of the majority of this framework. It really is important to give some time to think about all the possible services that might be needed for this building, not just in terms of its use, but in terms of what its future use could possibly become. I don't want to have to dig this up ever again. Now, before I backfill against this retaining wall, I do need to give consideration to and deal with groundwater and surface water. Where's that going to go? A lot of moisture will percolate through this ground and find its way to the back of the retaining wall. And if it can't get out, puts a lot of extra pressure on that wall. So in the bottom of the trench, before I actually backfill, I'm going to be putting some of this 20mm chip, a very angular rock that's going to provide good drainage. And embedded in that stone is going to be some of this perforated drain pipe. That allows the moisture to run through the drainage chip into the pipe and then out through the outlet in the front of the wall. And to ensure that the pipe and the drainage chip doesn't get filled with silt in the future, that will filter through with the water, I'm going to be wrapping it with some geotextile fabric. A really strong woven fabric that's going to keep that separation but allow moisture through. It'll capture all the silt, but the moisture will still get through. The final thing is the groundwater. I've designed a system so that we've got drainage on the top of this slab here, and I need to tie that into this French drain system. So I just need to be aware of that and make sure as I'm backfilling, I'm providing for that feature in the future. Right, so I'm going to get some geotextile into the trench first of all to hold back the soil and keep that separation. Then I'll get the pipework in place and bury it with around 400mm of depth of this drainage channel. Got 2 cubic meters here, and I'm hoping that's going to be enough. Tough stuff to cut. No match for the Leatherman. Now this Geotex fabric is going to get wrapped over the pipework and the drainage chip once I've got that installed. And it's not a windy day, so it's not flapping around, but when I tip in the chip, the gravel, there's a good chance it could come unsettled. So I'm just going to take some screws and just pin it to a rock. Just going to take some screws here and just pin it down just to stop it moving whilst I get the drainage chip in place, and then I'll come back, remove the screws and fold over the fabric before I backfill. Well, we're getting quite a network of conduit and pipework in here, but I need that drain coil to be pretty flat in the bottom of this trench, really. So I'm going to thread it underneath this electrical conduit and bring it out through this way. If I can reach it, because it's getting pretty tight in here. Got it. That's perfect. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there is the outlet for all of this stormwater. Now, to connect all of these pipes together, there's one from this side of the wall, there's one from behind me, and then there's going to be a spout here coming from a gully trap. I've got this four-way connector. Perfect solution, I think. And it even fits in the hole. Check that out. Now, what I don't know yet is whether this coil can bend 90 degrees to get into here. If it can't, I can bring a 90-degree elbow out and use that as my vertical pipe. So I think what I'm going to do is make the connection first. Now, I think I'm going to try and glue this, but before I do, just see if we can get a good bend on that. And that's a pretty good radius, I think. Whether it's good enough, let's see. Yeah, that is going to work really well. Okay, I'm going to get that glued in, get this one glued in here, and then I can put my elbow on here for my vertical pipe. I love it when a plan comes together, because it rarely does. And this doesn't have to be a watertight connection. I mean, the idea here is that water gets into the pipe. But I don't want it coming apart whilst I'm backfilling. This type of plastic possibly doesn't get melted by this solvent. Let's find out. Give it a quick spin. Now, if this glue will stick this type of plastic, within a few seconds it'll start to melt the surface and then they'll bond together. And it took a few minutes, but I did get a good bond between the surfaces. So what I'm going to do here is just wrap it up with some good quality insulation or duct tape, and that'll just hold it together while the glue sets up. Right, we'll take that as well, just to hold it together while that glue sets up. And then I can work on what length this piece needs to be. What is that? Oh no, it's broken it! The wind's blown it over. Well, the wind has finally decided for me whether or not it was good enough for me to fix my mistake of cutting this panel too short by putting a 100mm strip at the bottom. It's blown it over. You can see the nail at the top in the centre is just bent. It's blown it off, down into the trench and snapped it in half. Now I could just glue it back together and put it up and it'd probably be okay. But I'm going to take this as a sign. I'm going to rip all those three pieces off at the bottom there, go and get a new panel and make it again, this time to the correct measurements. There we go. Right, that's all the pipework completed down in the trench. Now I just need to put in a vertical stack that's going to connect to the rainwater and surface water pipework. And once it's cut through, making sure to take the time to remove all those burrs from the inside and outside surface. From the inside, so that it doesn't collect any sludge or debris as the water rushes through, and from the outside, so I get an easier assembly. I need to check that I've got the centres right. So the vertical pipe I'm putting in at the moment is this one here that's going to connect this surface drain gully to the French drain outlet. I will be cutting it to put in this T to pick up from another side gully, but I just want to make sure that's in approximately the right place. So I'm looking for 650 millimeters from the floor structure of the tiny barn to the center line. Let's see what we've actually got as it stands. 350 puts my center line there. It's a 245, which puts my grid there, which is actually okay. Right, going with it. Let's glue some stuff together. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. So's that. All right, I'm happy with that. I think we can get some stone in the ground now. I finished the drainage by installing this dimple mat. The dimple mat has a couple of jobs to do. The first job is to protect this bitumen seal from piercing, from scratching, from penetration from rocks in the ground. The second purpose is in relation to these dimples here. It provides a channel for condensation and ground moisture to actually run down the back of the wall and capture into the drain, which I'm going to install next. And where the ends of these two pipes terminate, I'm just taking some of the geotextile fabric, folding it over the end like so. I'll pop a bit of tape on there just to stop it moving while I backfill. And that'll just stop all the rocks and stones getting in at the end there and provide an easy access for any moisture. Well, it's a really cold start to the day this morning, and that is probably a good thing, because I'm going to be spending the best part of today digging off this area here and pulling it all in behind the wall and flattening off. Digging is good in the cold, not so much in the hot. But before I do that, I need to just finish off this drainage field, pulling this geotex fabric over the chip that I put in yesterday, making sure that's completely covered and isolated from the soil and potential silt that goes on top of it. Then I can remove this old retaining wall and get backfilling. So that's a minimum of 400 millimeters depth of the drainage chip, about 16 inches. Now, I do like a bit of demolition, and this has been a long time coming, removing this old retaining wall. But just look how soft that concrete was around these posts. Didn't take much breaking at all. Now before I get too carried away with this backfilling, I need to make sure that I finish off all the drainage that needs to go in this trench. I don't want to dig it up again. I've got the second sheet of this dimple mat to put up here, and it will overlap a significant amount, so now is a good time to get that in. And I need to put my surface drainage in, or at least the pipe work for that. Now I'm going to be using these rain pits with a mesh to catch any debris, leaves and such like, and then on the top of that there will be an aluminium cover or grid. There's going to be one of these over by the post there to catch the downspout from this side of the roof, one all the way around the other side of the shed, again to catch the other side of the roof, and there's going to be one in this corner where you see that vertical pipe, and they all need to tie together. So I'm just going to get all that pipe work in place, get this extra dimple mat in, then I can carry on with the backfilling. So I'm just mocking up the pipe work here for these rain collection pits and making sure I'm getting the right fall before I cut them to length and join them and put them in the ground. And I've mocked this one up here underneath the shed floor, or rather to the end of the floor, to the left hand side of the tiny barn. There's a rain collection pit just around the corner over here, and you can see the angle of the driveway, the concrete driveway. It's quite steep. Now, I'm installing the pipe counterintuitively to actually fall in this direction. So it needs to be lower at this end than this end. You can see my spirit level, that's at my drop or fall. I'm going to mock up the rest of the pipe work, and then I can go ahead and install the rest of that pipe. Now, the recommended minimum fall on this stormwater pipe is 1 in 100. And that means for every metre in length it needs to drop by 10 millimetres. That's a minimum. I want to go slightly more than that, but not too much more. If I go too steep, the water will flow really quickly, and if any solids find their way into the pipework, they could get left behind and eventually potentially cause a blockage. So I want to go a little bit more than 10 millimetres in every metre, but not too much. I mentioned earlier on that one of the blue water pipes was going to be supplying a hose tap to the tiny barn. So now's the time to just dig another trench and get that pipe buried and exiting in exactly the right location. Right, now I've got the obvious high spots all raked forward. I'm going to get a string line in and just bring it from side to side to see if there's any more digging off I need to do. Now, I'm not trying to dial this in perfectly just yet. I just want to get it close, and I want to get it below grade. I don't mind adding material later. I still haven't compacted this yet with a plate compactor, so I don't mind putting extra material on in the future, but I don't want to have to dig it off. Now, as you can see, I've wrapped the string line around a brick, and that allows me to pull it tight and position it on top of the two sides of the retaining wall. That's the underside of the bed of material that's going to support the sets. So I need to dig off any material that comes above that height. Okay, well that puts me about 50 millimeters below grade. I've just got to dig off the rest of this lump. So that's just a few hours of breaking it up with a pick and raking it level and then checking it constantly with the string line, repositioning it as I go. Well, it feels really good to have this space kind of flat now, and I can actually start using it as a safer working area. And it's really good to be able to stand here and not be inside a really deep trench. Now, there's still plenty to do on this project, of course. I can start to do some of the more decorative and structural parts. I've got some decorative brickwork to build around this fireplace here. I've got a brick skinned wall to put over that retaining wall down there, a brick step, and of course, the tiny barn structure itself that's going to enclose all of this space. I'm really looking forward to getting into some of those parts of the project next. Do remember though, if you're looking for a quality dust mask that's very comfortable to wear hour after hour after hour, I am going to recommend this. I don't have to. It's not a sponsored video, but it's a great product. Head over to the Basecamp website. There's a link in the description below. And of course, remember your 10% discount code, which is also in that description below. But that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Bye. Now, I think I'm going to get the van and try and park here.